When I was 16, my dad told me that in every family, there's the golden child, the glue, and the ghost. I didn't ask which one I was. I already knew. My name's Ryan. I'm 28 now, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the ghost. My older sister Megan, the golden child since the day she was born. Valedictorian, cheer captain, Ivy League scholarship, and the kind of person who says, I don't mean to brag, but before bragging. She's 3 years older than me and somehow still acts like she's 22 and auditioning for a shampoo commercial every time she walks into a room. Our dad used to say she was destined for greatness. Our mom just cried at every award ceremony, like Megan cured cancer or something. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who got decent grades, kept to himself, and stopped trying to compete around the age of 12. I'm not going to pretend I was some tortured outcast or anything. I had friends, I played guitar, I wasn't getting in trouble. I just wasn't her. And in our house, that meant I was background noise. The kind of son who could be in the same room and still get asked if he was coming over for dinner. It was always little things. Megan got a used BMW for her high school graduation. A safe car, Dad said, to get her to and from her internship at the mayor's office. I got a firm handshake and a card with no money in it. Megan got family photo albums turned into slideshows for her birthday, complete with dramatic music and custom cupcakes from some bakery that needed 2 weeks' notice. I got a "Hey, you like steak, right?" text the morning of mine. At first, I figured it was just the way it was. Some kids were just born shinier, I guess. But it really started getting to me around college. Megan went out of state to a private university, and they paid for every penny. When it came time for me, my dad sat me down and said they could maybe help with books, but I need to learn responsibility. I didn't argue. I just got a job, found a decent state school with a scholarship, and figured that one day, I'd build something for myself that couldn't be ignored. That's exactly what I did. I don't mean to flex, I really don't. But I worked my butt off through college, graduated early, and by 24, I'd started my own tech consulting firm. Small at first, just me and a few clients I picked up through word of mouth. But it grew. Fast. My roommates joked that I had a horseshoe stuck somewhere, but I was just grinding quietly while everyone else was going out Thursday through Sunday. And now, I have 6 full-time employees, a downtown office, and yeah, enough money to do things most people would call early retirement goals. But I never really told my family about it. At least not all of it. I'd mention stuff here and there, a project I was working on, a new client. But I learned early on that trying to get attention in my family was like yelling into a hurricane. Megan would always find a way to redirect the conversation back to her. My mom would look confused. My dad would say something like, "That's nice, but how stable is that, long term?" And eventually, I just stopped trying. The weird thing is, the more successful I got, the less they seemed to ask. Almost like they preferred not knowing. Like if I wasn't saying much, they could just assume I was doing okay, but not too okay. Not more okay than Megan. Which brings me to the engagement party. It was last weekend at this trendy little winery just outside the city. Megan got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Jeff, who's fine. You know the type. Wears loafers without socks, calls every woman ma'am, and says things like, "I just want to pick your brain," without irony. But whatever. They seemed happy, and it was clear the party was a big deal. My parents went all out. White tents, string lights, catered food, a jazz quartet. It felt more like a wedding than an engagement party, but no one seemed to notice or care. I arrived about 15 minutes late, partly because I had work calls that morning, but mostly because I knew no one would notice. And I was right. I slipped in, said hi to a few cousins, nodded to my dad, who gave me the classic, "Hey, buddy," and a shoulder tap, then made my way to the open bar. That's when I saw Megan holding court near the fountain, surrounded by a semicircle of guests, grinning like she just landed on the moon. She just got promoted to executive marketing director. Someone whispered behind me. Another voice chimed in. At 31. That's incredible. I took a sip of my drink and stared at the bubbles. They toasted her twice. Once with champagne after the welcome speech, and again during dinner when my uncle gave this long-winded tribute about her being the future of the family name. My mom wiped tears from her eyes. My dad clinked glasses with Jeff and called him son. My grandma leaned over to whisper, "You must be so proud of your sister." I smiled politely. No one asked me about work. No one even brought up the fact that I'd flown in from a conference in Berlin that week. No one seemed to care that I had anything going on at all. And maybe that's when it finally clicked for me. It wasn't just ignorance. It was intentional. They'd all decided who I was. The quiet one. The afterthought. The one who shows up, smiles, and fades into the background. I wasn't the main character of this family. I wasn't even supporting cast. I was the guy who stands just off-screen, holding a light. But I had something they didn't know about. 2 days earlier, I'd done something that had been in the works for months. Something I never told anyone about. Not because I wanted to keep it secret, but because I knew if I told them, they'd either dismiss it or spin it into another reason why Megan deserved more praise. So I stayed quiet. I waited. And now, sitting there at this candlelit dinner table, with everyone raising their glasses to my sister's brilliance, I suddenly felt the urge to speak. Not out of spite, not even really out of anger, but out of something deeper, a quiet need to reclaim something that had been taken from me without permission, the right to be seen. I reached into my jacket pocket and ran my fingers over the small black box. It wasn't fancy, just a little velvet box with a key inside. I looked across the table at my grandmother, who was dabbing her eyes with a napkin, completely unaware. I cleared my throat. No one noticed. So I stood up. That got their attention. Heads turned. Forks paused midair. Megan furrowed her brow, probably wondering why I'd interrupt her movie. And then I walked around the table, slowly, and placed the box in front of my grandmother. She blinked. "What's this?" I smiled and said, "The keys to your new home. I bought it yesterday, in cash." You could have heard a pin drop. Megan's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the patio stones. My dad's face went blank. My uncle leaned in and whispered, You bought what?" I didn't answer. I just looked around the table, calm as ever, and finally said what I'd been waiting years to say. But that moment, that specific moment, that was just the beginning. Because what none of them knew, not my sister, not my parents, not even my grandmother, was that the house I bought came with a story. A story about money, loyalty, and everything this family had tried to hide under monogrammed napkins and forced smiles. And once I opened that box, there was no going back. My grandmother didn't say anything for a few seconds after I handed her the box. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it and looked inside. Everyone at the table leaned forward instinctively, like some invisible thread had been pulled through all of them. It was like time cracked. Megan's shattered wine glass still lay in pieces on the stone tiles, but nobody moved. My grandmother looked up at me, wide-eyed. "What is this?" she asked again, quieter this time, as if afraid she'd imagined it. "The deed is being finalized tomorrow," I said calmly. "But it's yours. Fully paid off. No mortgage. It's in the neighborhood you always loved, near the lake with the white fence and those rose bushes. Remember?" She blinked, then gasped. Now, you'd think the family would erupt with joy at that point, that they'd leap to their feet and say something like, "Wow, Ryan, that's incredible. You did this for Grandma." Or even, "How the heck did you pull this off?" But no, the silence that followed felt off, like a thin sheet of glass between me and everyone else at that table. My mom was the first to break it, forcing a chuckle that sounded too sharp. "Ryan, that's very generous, but you didn't have to do something so extravagant. We had plans to move Mom into that senior village next spring." I turned my head toward her. The one 40 minutes away with no yard and shared bathrooms. She didn't answer. Megan, still holding her napkin midair like a frozen emoji, finally broke out of her daze. "Wait. Hold on. You bought Grandma a house." I nodded. "Yeah. I've been looking for a few months. Found the perfect one. It just felt right." "But, with what money?" she asked, her voice clipped. She looked at me like I'd announced I'd bought a yacht with Monopoly cash. "You're still doing that freelance thing, right?" "It's not freelance. It's a firm. My firm." Jeff leaned forward now. "Wait, you run a firm? Like employees?" "6 full-time. A few contractors." My dad gave a slow blink, his fork resting against his plate. "Since when?" I shrugged. "A couple years now." The energy in the air shifted again, like someone had cracked the thermostat and the heat was starting to rise. It wasn't awe. It wasn't even confusion. It was something darker. Megan's expression had twisted just slightly. She wasn't confused anymore. She was annoyed. I saw the flicker behind her eyes, not shock that I'd done something generous, but resentment that I'd taken the spotlight. She crossed her arms. "So you're saying you just, what, casually bought a house? In cash?" I didn't flinch. "Yes." For Grandma. I looked at my grandmother, whose hand was still over her mouth. She's always wanted to live closer to the lake. And with everything she's done for us, I figured it was time someone did something for her. That's when my mom stood up. Not abruptly, but with a kind of silent authority, the way moms do when they're about to give a lecture. "Ryan," she said with a tight smile, "can I speak to you in private?" That was the first crack. The first sign this wasn't just about a house or a moment. This was going to become a problem. I followed her behind one of the white columns by the catering station. She didn't yell. My mom rarely yells. But her voice was sharp enough to slice paper. "I need you to tell me the truth," she said. "Did you really buy that house?" I nodded. "Yes, I did." She stared at me. "Why wouldn't you tell us you were doing well? Why keep that a secret?" "Because whenever I try to talk about my life, no one listens." "That's not true." I tilted my head. "What's my company called?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Exactly." I sighed. "It's not a secret. I just stopped volunteering information when it was clear nobody wanted it." She blinked rapidly and looked away, her arms folding tightly. "Well, you blindsided your sister. On her day." And there it was. I didn't say anything during the toasts. I didn't interrupt dinner. I just gave Grandma a gift. She narrowed her eyes. A gift that made everyone else look small. I bit the inside of my cheek. There it was again. It wasn't about what I did. It was about how it made Megan feel. When we came back to the table, the atmosphere was different. Like someone had dimmed the room without touching the lights. Megan was quiet now, twirling the stem of her fresh wine glass. Jeff kept glancing between me and her, as if unsure whether he was supposed to step in. Dinner went on. People talked, but not to me. Conversations bloomed in little circles that excluded me entirely. When dessert came, someone passed over the lemon tart I love and gave me a slice of cheesecake instead. Small thing, but I noticed. That night, as I was getting ready to leave, Grandma pulled me aside. She had tears in her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She held my hand. "You know, I always worried you were drifting away from the family, that you felt invisible." I smiled. "I did." "Well," she said, squeezing my fingers, "not anymore. I left that party feeling like I'd finally stepped out of someone else's shadow. But the fallout started immediately. The next day, I woke up to 2 missed calls from my dad and 1 long text from my mom. "Your gesture last night was sweet, but we need to talk. Megan is really upset. She feels like you tried to upstage her. We're not saying you did anything wrong, but in the future, please be more considerate of how your actions affect others. Family harmony is important." Family harmony. That phrase stuck with me. Over the next few days, it got worse. Megan posted a not-so-subtle Instagram story about people who show off instead of support. Jeff commented with a flexing emoji and a thumbs down. A few relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly started messaging, asking about my business success, but it felt performative. Probing. Then came the group chat. We have a family group chat. It's usually dead. But this time, my mom kicked off a message thread asking if people would be willing to contribute monthly toward Grandma's new home expenses, since she was moving to a nicer area now. Megan jumped in immediately with, "Ryan set the bar high. Let's all pitch in." It was like they'd twisted my gesture into an open tab. I replied, "Grandma's house is fully paid for. No mortgage, no utilities for the first year. I've got it covered." Crickets. Then my dad finally replied, "We appreciate that, but it's not sustainable for one person to shoulder it all. We're a family. It should be shared." I wanted to scream. Not one thank you. Not one, "We're proud of you, Ryan." Just guilt, deflection, and a growing undercurrent of resentment, like I'd broken some unspoken contract by stepping out of line. A week later, I got invited to dinner. Just me, Mom, Dad, Megan, and Jeff. Grandma wasn't included. I showed up out of curiosity. Big mistake. It started nice enough. Wine, bread, laughter. But halfway through the main course, my dad cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he said, "and we think it's time we started discussing the future of this family, responsibilities, expectations, and support." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay." Megan chimed in. "We're planning a big wedding, and we want everyone to be part of it, including financially." I blinked. "Sorry." Jeff raised his glass. "We're thinking of a destination wedding. Italy, maybe. But we'd want help covering the villa rental. We already know you can afford it." I nearly choked. "You want me to help pay for your wedding?" Megan smiled tightly. It's about being part of the experience. You made a big gesture for Grandma, and that was beautiful. But this is for all of us. A shared celebration. I stared at my plate. My blood was pounding in my ears. Then my dad added, and down the line, we'll need to talk about inheritance arrangements. You've clearly done well, and that changes things. That was the moment something broke. Something deep. It wasn't just that they didn't appreciate what I did. It was that they saw me as a resource. A bank account. A counterbalance to Megan's spotlight. And they weren't proud of me. They were calculating me. I stood up slowly, pushed my chair back, and said, I'll think about it. Then I walked out. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and stared at my phone, rereading every message, every text, every reply. And I realized something. I hadn't just been the ghost. I'd been the safety net, the silent backup plan, the emotional understudy for a family that only turned its head when I lit the stage on fire. So I decided, if they wanted a performance, I'd give them one, but not the one they expected. And when I was done, they wouldn't just see me. They'd never forget me. For days after that dinner, I didn't return calls. Not because I was angry. I was past anger. I was just hollow, drained, like someone had unplugged a cord in my chest, and all the voltage that had fueled me through that dramatic high had finally run out. I wasn't surprised that no one followed up with a real apology. Megan texted me a few times, mostly passive-aggressive jabs about hoping I'm still coming to the cake tasting. And if you're done with your silent tantrum, let's talk budgets. My dad sent one text that said, we need to discuss your role in the family moving forward, like he was offering me a promotion at a job I didn't apply for. My mom called, left a vague voicemail about understanding both sides and how emotions were high. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a weekend off. A full, no laptop, no client calls, no glancing at Slack weekend. I drove out to the mountains with just a bag of clothes, a stack of books, and a cheap Airbnb with a fireplace and a tiny porch overlooking a forest that looked like it had secrets. The first night, I sat outside for hours, just listening to the silence. It was the kind of quiet that wraps around you. Not empty, full, alive. I stared up at the stars and thought about everything that had led to this moment. How many years I'd spent waiting for someone else to give me permission to feel proud. How many times I'd minimized my success so I wouldn't make Megan uncomfortable. How many times I'd swallowed disappointment like it was dinner. At some point, I stopped thinking and just let the stillness do its work. When I got back on Monday, I called Grandma. She picked up on the first ring. Oh, honey, I've been worried. I'm okay, I told her. Just needed to unplug for a bit. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. I'm proud of you, Ryan. And that simple sentence? It almost cracked me open. We talked for over an hour. She told me how she'd gone to visit the house again with the real estate agent, how the porch had the same kind of swing her old one did when she was a girl, and how the neighbors had already brought her muffins. She was glowing. She was more alive than I'd heard her in years. That call reminded me of something important, that my success didn't have to be loud to be meaningful. It didn't have to be seen by everyone. It just had to matter to the right people. So I went back to work, but not in the same way. I started cutting out the noise, clients who disrespected boundaries, partnerships that were lukewarm, meetings that didn't need to happen. I got serious about automation, hired a virtual assistant, and gave my most loyal employee a promotion and equity stake. We rebranded the firm, redesigned the website, and launched a new campaign that took off faster than any of us expected. Within 4 months, we doubled our client base. Within 6, we were on track to triple revenue. But more than that, I felt lighter, focused, like I was finally steering the ship instead of just keeping it from crashing. During that time, I barely spoke to my family. Not out of spite, just peace. They didn't ask about my life, and I didn't offer updates. Megan went full wedding brain and started blasting social media with Pinterest boards and dress fittings and counting down to forever captions. My parents gushed in the comments like she was royalty, and I watched from a distance, no longer feeling like I needed a seat at that table. But even at peace, the past has a way of knocking. One morning, about 9 months after the engagement party, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, I froze. It was Jeff. His voice was shaky. Hey man. Look, I know things have been weird, but I was wondering if we could meet for a coffee or something. I really need to talk. Part of me wanted to delete the message right then and there. But another part, the one that had spent years reading people like spreadsheets, heard something in his voice. Desperation. So I agreed. We met at a cafe near my office. He was already seated when I arrived, hunched over like a man twice his age. He looked rough, unshaven, eyes sunken. I didn't sit down right away. You good? He looked up and gave a sheepish nod. Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I pulled out the chair. Make it worth my time. He exhaled. Okay, I'll just say it. Megan and I were in trouble. I raised an eyebrow. Define trouble. He leaned in. Financial. Wedding costs exploded. Deposits are non-refundable. We thought we had more in savings. Turns out Megan's credit cards are maxed, and... Wait, I interrupted. You didn't know? He hesitated. I thought she was managing it. She said she had a plan, but the planner just dropped us. Vinny wants full payment early. And your parents, they offered to help, but it's nowhere near enough. I sipped my coffee. So you came to me? He nodded. No. He blinked. Just like that. I smiled politely. I don't owe you a bailout. It's not like that. We're family, man. Family didn't seem to matter when you tried to drag me into a budget meeting like I was your investor. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Look, I said, I'm not mad. I'm just done. He sat back, defeated. She's going to flip. I stood up. Then maybe it's time she learned how to land. I left the cafe feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Clarity. But that wasn't the end. Because a week later, the real fallout hit. I got a call from Grandma. She sounded shaken. They want to move me out of the house. My grip tightened on the phone. What? Your mother came by this morning with some papers. Said it was a temporary reassignment, that you'd agreed to it. That there was some tax complication with the deed. My blood ran cold. I didn't agree to anything, I said flatly. Don't sign anything. I'll be there in an hour. When I got to the house, she handed me the documents. It was a legal transfer form, quietly worded, full of jargon. If signed, it would move ownership to a family trust managed by, you guessed it, my dad. There was even a typed cover letter. To ensure sustainable long-term care for mother in alignment with family goals. I was shaking. This wasn't just greed. This was theft dressed up in concern. I called a lawyer that night. Then I dug deeper. I pulled transaction histories, emails, messages. I had copies of every wire, every deed record, every signature. I built a folder, a case file, of everything they tried to twist behind my back. And in the process, I found something else. Something I hadn't expected. Buried in a shared financial spreadsheet my mom had accidentally left accessible from a link she'd once emailed me was a tab labeled contingency. In it were names. My name, with estimated contribution percentages. Megan's wedding. Grandma's housing. Retirement home funds. Vacation slush fund. Like I was an ATM with arms. And under Q4 plan, next to my name, was a note. Reframe support as shared legacy contribution. Appeal to guilt if resistance. I stared at that line for what felt like an hour. They hadn't just taken me for granted. They'd mapped me out, strategized how to use me, controlled me. And in that moment, the last of the ghost I used to be faded out. I wasn't just going to protect what was mine anymore. I was going to reclaim everything they thought they owned. And when I was done, they wouldn't recognize the man standing in front of them. Because I wasn't coming to the next family event as Ryan the Quiet One. I was coming as the man with the receipts. And a plan. Most people think revenge is about rage, fury, heat, screaming into the void and slamming doors. But that's not how it happens when you've spent your whole life being underestimated. For me, revenge came slowly, like a morning fog rolling into a valley. Quiet, cold, patient. I didn't want to burn bridges. I wanted to make them walk across the one they set on fire, barefoot. The first thing I did was lawyer up. My attorney, Alan, was the kind of guy who wore three-piece suits to video calls and spoke in a tone so measured it made people uncomfortable. I liked him immediately. He reviewed the deed transfer papers my mom gave Grandma and exhaled through his nose. This isn't just shady. It's predatory, he said. Your name's on the original property transfer as purchaser. This house is legally under your ownership and gifted to your grandmother. Any attempt to shift ownership under the pretense of a family trust without your explicit consent is fraudulent. I nodded. And what about the letter? The part where they said I agreed. He tilted his head. Forgery or manipulation. We'll dig into that. Alan helped me draft a cease and desist letter that same night. one that made it clear any further attempts to interfere with Grandma's property would result in legal action. I had it hand-delivered to my parents' address the next morning, notarized and signed. They didn't respond. Not with words, anyway. A few days later, Megan posted a vague Instagram story with a photo of a gavel and the caption, "Some people take things too far. Family should be sacred." Hashtag disappointed but not surprised. The comments section lit up with the usual sycophants, all assuming someone had stolen from her or wronged her in some way. I didn't reply. Instead, I started planning. The problem with my family was that they operated on image. Everything was about optics, perception. Megan's entire persona was built around being the dazzling, brilliant firstborn, the flawless daughter with the perfect life. My parents? They propped her up like she was a monument to their parenting skills. And me? I was the scaffolding they ignored until they needed to hang another banner on their legacy. So I figured if they wanted to turn our family into a brand, I'd treat it like a hostile takeover. I started collecting data. First, I compiled every text, email, and social media post from Megan or my parents that hinted at manipulation. Anything that could show a pattern of coercion, guilt-tripping, or entitlement. I added copies of the contingency spreadsheet I'd found in that shared folder, timestamped, backed up, and stored on multiple encrypted drives. Next, I spoke to Grandma again. She was heartbroken, but not shocked. "I always thought they had your sister on a pedestal," she said, "but I never realized they were planning your life like a budget." "I don't want you in the middle of this," I told her. She shook her head. "I'm already in the middle. But I'm not afraid of them. Not anymore." And with that, I had my first ally. Then came the wedding invitation. A thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, sealed with gold foil and Megan's initials embossed on the flap. Inside was the announcement. A destination wedding in Italy, specifically Tuscany, with a week of events, 2 rented villas, and a black tie ceremony at a vineyard that looked like it belonged in a perfume commercial. My name was printed, but there was no +1. And taped inside was a note, handwritten in Megan's cursive. "We'd love if you could contribute to the wine tasting event. Your success would mean a lot to us all. Let me know what you can pitch in. XO Meg." No amount specified, just an assumption. I stared at that note for a full minute before laughing out loud. It wasn't even a request. It was a bill dressed as affection. I didn't respond. Instead, I RSVP'd yes. Because I wasn't just going to crash their narrative. I was going to rewrite the ending. While I prepared for Italy, I started shifting things behind the scenes. I told my assistant to block off 2 weeks around the wedding dates. Not just for the trip, but for what would come after. I handed off day-to-day operations of my firm to my second-in-command. I didn't want distractions. Then I reached out to an old friend, Naomi. She was a freelance investigative journalist, the kind who dug up celebrity tax evasion scandals and once exposed a politician's fake charity on live TV. We'd met in college and stayed friends over the years, bonding over our mutual love of underdog stories and iced black coffee. I told her everything. Not just the house. Not just the wedding. The whole story. She didn't interrupt. Just scribbled notes in a leather-bound journal, occasionally raising an eyebrow. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You want exposure?" "No. I want leverage." She smiled. Even better. Naomi started poking around, and what she found was worse than I expected. Turns out, Megan's promotion was partially the result of my parents' interference. Her company had been contracted by a business my dad's firm partially invested in. Not illegal, but suspicious, especially when you considered how often Megan spoke at networking events sponsored by clients who had also worked with our family. It wasn't criminal, but it wasn't clean. And then Naomi found something else, a small LLC registered in Megan's name. It was set up months ago, supposedly for wedding coordination consulting. But no real business existed. No invoices. No clients. Just one bank account, with multiple transfers from my mom's savings. At first glance, a fake business to launder wedding funds. Naomi couldn't legally access the amounts, but she showed me enough breadcrumbs to paint the picture. They weren't just asking me to fund the wedding. They were already funneling family money into it behind closed doors. That was my tipping point. So I drafted a plan. Step 1, play nice. I reached out to Megan with a breezy text, excited for Tuscany. "Let me know if you need help organizing anything." She responded in minutes, gushing about welcome bags and florists and how glad she was we were back on the same page. Step 2. Document everything. Every interaction. Every request. Every financial hint. I knew Megan would push boundaries again. And when she did, I'd have the record. Sure enough, 2 weeks before the wedding, she sent me a follow-up message. Hey, if you could cover the wine tasting venue fee, it's €4,000. We'll reimburse part of it from gifts. No offer to split. No asking if I was okay with it. Just another assumption. I replied with a thumbs up and asked her to send over the invoice. She did. I paid it. Then I added it to the folder. Step 3. The wild card. I wasn't just going to bring receipts. I was going to bring truth. And to do that, I needed a way in, not just to the wedding, but to the stage. So I called Grandma. Are you feeling up to traveling? There was a pause. I've been dreaming of Italy since I was 23, she said. I'll start packing. I booked her first-class tickets. Got her a suite at a nearby boutique hotel with a full-time driver. No stairs. No fuss. She deserved to be there, and not just because she was the matriarch. She was going to be the catalyst. The ceremony was set for the first Saturday after arrival. The welcome dinner, the Friday before. That was when I'd make my move. Not loud. Not angry. Just surgical. At the perfect moment, with the perfect words, in front of the perfect audience. I didn't want to humiliate Megan. I wanted her to reveal herself, and I was going to give her every tool to do it. All I had to do was wait. The villa in Tuscany looked like something out of a dream. Golden sunlight pouring over the olive trees, soft laughter drifting through marble archways, and the clinking of wine glasses echoing across the courtyard. It was picturesque, elegant, expensive, and completely fake. Every detail, from the imported orchids to the monogrammed place settings, screamed curated perfection. Megan's masterpiece. A week-long wedding designed not for love, but for spectacle. I arrived a day before the welcome dinner, dressed casually in jeans and a pressed linen shirt. Megan greeted me with air kisses and a champagne flute already in hand. Jeff trailed behind her like a loyal puppy. So glad you made it, she beamed. We were worried you'd flake after, well, everything. I gave her a smile I didn't mean. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The night of the welcome dinner, the courtyard glowed with fairy lights and tall candelabras. Guests mingled in designer cocktail attire, while servers floated around with trays of truffle arancini and fig crostini. Every table had its own floral arrangement, a tiny framed quote about love, and a personalized note from Megan and Jeff. I was seated at table 4. So was Grandma. And so was the wedding planner. The real one, not the consulting firm Megan had created as a shell account. Naomi, dressed in a flowy cream dress and vintage pearl earrings, fit in perfectly. Nobody recognized her. Nobody suspected a thing. Megan started her toast just before dessert. Thank you all so much for coming, she said, glass raised. This week is about celebration, love, and family. The people who've supported Jeff and me every step of the way. I want to give special thanks to my parents, who've helped us plan this dream, and to my brother Ryan, who, despite being a little mysterious, finally came through for us. Your wine tasting sponsorship was chef's kiss. Laughter rippled politely. She turned to me and winked. You do have a flair for drama, don't you? I raised my glass and said nothing. She continued, shifting seamlessly into a story about how she and Jeff met, how they bonded over jazz music and spreadsheets, how fate brought them together. Marriage, she concluded, is about unity. And this week, we're here to unify our two families. And with that, the band started to play. But I wasn't finished. I stood up slowly and tapped my spoon against my wine glass. The universal sound of incoming drama. The band stopped. All eyes turned to me. I'd like to say something, I began, smiling gently. About family. And legacy. Megan's face twitched, just barely. Jeff's eyes narrowed. I've always believed that family is earned, not just inherited, I continued. Some people show their love through words. Some show it through sacrifice. And some show it through spreadsheets. Nervous chuckles floated up. Megan was smiling now, but it was the kind of smile you give when someone's handing you a gift and you're not sure if it's ticking. So, I'd like to share a few things I've learned recently, I said, pulling a folded paper from my jacket. Things I think everyone here deserves to know. Megan's voice cut in. Ryan, maybe we save speeches for tomorrow? I ignored her. The villa we're all staying in. Beautiful, isn't it? Paid for through a business account that doesn't technically exist. registered under a company with no clients, no invoices, and a fake address. Gasps rippled. Heads turned. That's right, I said. Megan's wedding planning firm is just a funnel. One that's been used to quietly launder family money, including funds siphoned from my mother's account under the guise of shared expenses. My mom, seated at table 2, went ghost white. Jeff stood up. What are you doing? I'm finishing my toast, I said calmly, because I think the truth deserves a seat at this table. I turned to Naomi, who stood and walked up beside me, handing me a small folder. Inside this envelope, I continued, are bank records, email threads, and document copies. All legally obtained. All time-stamped. All backed up. I handed it to Megan. She didn't take it, so I dropped it onto her plate. I turned to the crowd. If anyone's curious, you can find more details in a story that will be published next week, outlining how fake firms and insider connections helped secure promotions, inflate reputations, and build a narrative that had very little to do with merit. Naomi nodded silently. A few guests recognized her now. Murmurs swelled like a storm cloud. Megan was frozen, lips parted but no sound coming out. I wasn't done. One more thing, I said. Grandma. She looked up, calm but alert. You were almost evicted. By your own daughter and son-in-law, under the lie that I'd approved it. You were nearly removed from the house I bought for you. That ends tonight. I turned back to Megan and Jeff. Your wedding venue is still paid for. Enjoy it. But tomorrow, I won't be attending. Neither will Grandma. And neither will the 27 guests who RSVP'd through me. Confusion sparked. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. A buzz traveled around the room. Phones lighting up. Notifications pinging. A message in the wedding group chat. Change of plans. Private event at Villa Andorra. Details in your inbox. Dress code. Freedom. Megan's face cracked. What did you do? I booked a second villa, I said simply. For the people who care more about love than leverage. She opened her mouth. Closed it. You're ruining this. No, I said. You did. I'm just setting the record straight. I nodded to the band. They began to play again, not jazz this time. Something stronger. Something with teeth. Guests stood. Some went to Megan, asking questions. Others came to me. Hugs. Claps on the back. Quiet gratitude. Grandma looped her arm through mine as we left. That night, I stood on the balcony of Villa Andorra and watched as headlights disappeared down the gravel path from the main venue. Guests choosing sides. Truth traveling faster than guilt. The article went live the next morning, titled, White Dresses and Red Flags. Inside the Wedding Built on Lies. It trended for 48 hours. Megan's employer issued a statement distancing themselves. The promotion was reassessed. Her social media went dark. Jeff deleted his accounts entirely. My parents didn't speak to me for weeks. But then again, they hadn't really spoken to me for years. Grandma moved into her new home full-time that summer, with a garden swing and a lemon tree in the back. I visited every Sunday. As for me, I went back to work. Quietly. Steadily. No announcements. No need for applause. I didn't need a stage anymore. Just peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like the storm that cleared the sky.